Colorado collared every wolf it released. Then more showed up, with no collars. That's the problem in a single sentence. When the state brought wolves back, it did it carefully, every animal captured, tagged, and tracked by satellite, so biologists would always know exactly how many wolves were in Colorado and precisely where each one was. It was the most watched wolf population in America, and it still couldn't explain the ones that didn't have collars. This is the story of how wolves returned to Colorado, and the mystery buried inside it that the state has never fully solved. Because the official version is clean. The voters chose it, the biologists released them, the collars tracked them. But underneath that runs a stranger truth. Wolves that arrived on their own before anyone released a single one. Wolves whose DNA matches nothing in the state's files. And one animal found near Denver that had no business being within 900 miles of Colorado. By the end, you'll understand why the people who run this program can tell you exactly how many collared wolves are in Colorado tonight, and still can't tell you how many wolves are actually out there. Start with what was taken away, because the absence is the whole reason the arrivals are so strange. For thousands of years, the gray wolf was one of the defining predators of Colorado, through the mountains, the mesas, the high plains. And then, in a few short decades, it was systematically erased. A government-backed eradication campaign of trapping, shooting, and poisoning wiped the wolf out of the state. And by the 1940s, it was gone. Not rare. Gone. The last resident wolves in Colorado were killed off entirely, and for the better part of a century, the state had none. This wasn't an accident of habitat or a slow fade into scarcity. It was policy, bounties, poison stations, professional trappers paid by the pelt, a deliberate, organized campaign to remove an entire species from the map. And it worked so completely that a Coloradan born in 1950 could live an entire life in these mountains and never once hear a wild wolf howl. That silence held for roughly 70 years. A wolf-shaped hole in the map, right in the middle of the Rockies, because to the north in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, and to a lesser extent the desert southwest, wolves were clawing their way back from the same near extinction, protected now instead of hunted. Colorado sat in the gap between those recovering populations, empty. And the question that hung over the state for decades was simple. With wolves rebuilding on almost every side, how long could that emptiness really last? The answer, it turned out, was that the emptiness had already ended, quietly, years before anyone made it official. And the first proof was a body on the side of an interstate. June 2004. A female wolf is found dead beside Interstate 70 near Idaho Springs, not far west of Denver. It's the first confirmed wild wolf in Colorado in more than half a century. And it didn't come from any program because no program existed. It walked here, on its own, from somewhere north, across hundreds of miles of highway and fence and human country, only to die on the shoulder of a Colorado freeway. And it was not the last. Once you start looking at the record CPW keeps, the empty state starts to look a lot less empty. A wolf on video in North Park in 2007, a female from a Montana pack, presumed poisoned north of Rifle in 2009, a male from Wyoming caught on a trail camera in 2015, another shot near Kremling by a coyote hunter who said he thought it was a coyote, a male from Wyoming's Snake River pack, photographed in North Park in 2019. Then, in January 2020, 6 wolves confirmed together in Moffat County off a scavenged elk carcass, their identity nailed down by DNA. These were the ghosts. Lone dispersers mostly, young wolves that leave the pack they were born into and strike out alone, sometimes traveling astonishing distances to find territory and a mate. Wolves have been documented covering hundreds of miles on these journeys, and the northern Rockies population had grown enough that its overflow was spilling south, one animal at a time, back into the state that had spent decades making sure there were none. And then it went further than a lone wanderer. In 2021, 2 of those Wyoming migrants, a male and a female, met in North Park, the high valley of Jackson County, and did the thing no lone disperser can do alone. They bred. Their pups were the first wolves born in Colorado in some 80 years. The North Park Pack, it was called, and it existed entirely on its own, with no help from any agency, the clearest possible proof that the wolves didn't need Colorado's permission to come back. But that pack also became a warning of how brutal this return would be. several of its members, drifting north across the invisible line into Wyoming, where wolves have almost no protection, were reportedly lured over the border with electronic calls that imitate wounded prey and shot. A pack that assembled itself out of nothing, thinned out the moment it wandered onto the wrong side of a state line it couldn't see. Here's why that matters for everything that comes next. Before Colorado ever held a vote, before a single wolf was flown in and released, the wolves were already coming back by themselves. The state didn't reopen the door. The wolves found it. And that fact is about to make the official story a great deal more complicated, because in 2020, Colorado decided to force the door the rest of the way open. In November 2020, Coloradans did something no state had ever done. They voted a predator back into existence. Proposition 114 asked the people of Colorado directly whether the state should reintroduce and manage gray wolves on the western slope. Not the biologists, not the Wildlife Commission. The voters. It was the first time in American history that the return of a species was decided at the ballot box, and it passed by the thinnest of margins, just under 51%. Fewer than 2 votes in 100 separated a Colorado with wolves from a Colorado without them. Rarely has a wild animal owed its entire existence in a state to a margin that narrow. Half the state wanted wolves back. The other half very much did not. And that razor's edge split falls almost exactly along a line. The cities of the Front Range voted yes. The rural western slope, the ranching country where the wolves would actually live, voted no. That tension is the second thread of this whole story, and it never goes away. Because the law told Colorado Parks and Wildlife to do something genuinely hard. Take an apex predator that ranchers had spent a century eradicating, and deliberately put it back on the same land, on a deadline whether the people living there wanted it or not. The statute set the clock. Pause on the ground west of the Continental Divide by the end of 2023. And one detail in that plan is the key that unlocks the entire mystery. The thing that separates the wolves Colorado can account for from the wolves it can't. Every single wolf the state released would be wearing a collar, which means the moment an uncollared wolf turns up, the state has a problem it cannot immediately explain. Hold on to that. It's about to matter more than anything. December 2023. As the clock nearly ran out, Colorado made history for the second time. Over 5 days in mid-December, Colorado Parks and Wildlife released 10 gray wolves captured in eastern Oregon, flown to Colorado, and set loose in Grand and Summit counties on the western slope. They were the first wolves deliberately restored to the state since the government finished wiping them out 80 years earlier. Each one wore a satellite collar. From the second they hit the ground, biologists could watch them fan out across the map, west into Moffat County, north toward the Wyoming line, chasing elk through the snow. Then, in January 2025, the state doubled down. 15 more wolves, this time captured in the interior of British Columbia, in Canada, and released to reinforce the founding population. 25 reintroduced wolves in total, from 2 countries, every one of them tagged, numbered, and tracked. Those reintroduced wolves did what wolves do. They paired off and bred, and the first family to form from the released animals became known as the Copper Creek Pack. But Copper Creek turned into the program's first crisis. The pack developed a taste for livestock, and in 2024 the state took the extraordinary step of capturing the whole family and pulling it off the landscape. One member died from injuries before capture. The breeding male later died, and a single pup was left behind in the wild, uncollared, unaccounted for, a young wolf, loose in the mountains that the state would spend the next year trying to decide what to do about. Even the wolves Colorado did control had a way of slipping partway out of its hands. This is the part of the story the state tells with confidence, and it has every right to. This is the known population. The collared wolves, the ones with ID numbers and satellite pings and a file at CPW. If the story ended here, it would be a clean tale of a hard, controversial, successful reintroduction. But it doesn't end here, because at the same time the state was carefully releasing wolves it could track, other wolves, wolves with no collars, wolves in no file, kept walking into Colorado from the dark. And the first one to really rattle people didn't show up on the western slope at all. It showed up near Denver. That wolf is where this stops being a reintroduction story and starts being a mystery. And if a wild, unresolved question is your kind of thing, take 1 second and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel keep digging into these, because what showed up in eastern Colorado in the spring of 2024 wasn't supposed to be possible. Its collar told one story, its DNA told another, and the two didn't match. That spring, a wolf was trapped in Elbert County, Colorado, and almost nothing about it made sense. Start with the location. Elbert County isn't wolf country. It sits east of the Front Range, out on the plains, its county seat less than 50 miles from downtown Denver and a short drive from Colorado Springs. This is subdivisions and cattle country, nowhere near the western slope wilderness where the reintroduced wolves were released. Then came the details that turned a strange sighting into a genuine puzzle. The animal had no GPS collar, and no sign it had ever worn one, no mark where a collar had been removed. Colorado's own wolf tracking map showed none of the state's known wolves anywhere near the county, so the federal lab ran its DNA, and the results stopped everyone cold. This wasn't a reintroduced wolf that had slipped its collar. It wasn't a disperser from Wyoming or the Northern Rockies. The genetics identified it as a gray wolf from the Great Lakes population, a group genetically distinct from the Rocky Mountain wolves, native to the forests around Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Which means this animal was, potentially, something like 900 miles from where it belonged, on the wrong side of the Great Plains, in a county beside Metro Denver, with no collar and no explanation. Nobody could say how it got there. A wolf can travel enormous distances, and dispersers have shocked biologists before, but 900 miles across the open plains to the edge of a major city. That's not a stroll along a mountain corridor with cover and prey the whole way. That's a crossing of the wide-open Great Plains. Cattle country, highway country, the least wolf-friendly ground in America, by an animal that somehow slipped through all of it unseen until a trap in Elbert County closed on it. One neighboring rancher floated the only alternative theory anyone could muster. Maybe it had been someone's illegal pet. There was no evidence for that either. The honest official position was a shrug. A wolf from the wrong end of the country, and no way to explain the journey. And here's what makes it more than a one-off curiosity. It fit a pattern that was already building. Because the Elbert County wolf wasn't the only collarless ghost in the system. By early 2025, the state had a recurring problem, and it kept surfacing the same way. A wolf that officially wasn't there. In February 2025, Colorado Parks and Wildlife confirmed through a scat sample that at least one uncollared wolf was roaming the northwest corner of Moffat County. The DNA was unmistakably wolf, but when they compared it against the genetic files of every reintroduced animal, it matched none of them. This was not one of the Oregon wolves, not one of the British Columbia wolves, not the known pair from Wyoming. The agency's own spokesman said it plainly. They did not know which state the animal had come from or how long it had already been in Colorado. Think about what that admission means from an agency that prides itself on knowing. CPW can tell you the collar number of nearly every wolf it manages. It publishes their pack territories on a map. Its stated goal is to keep at least 2 working collars in every pack, precisely so nothing moves through the state unseen. And still, animals keep slipping through that net. Wolves confirmed by DNA, denied by the database, origin unknown. It happened again, close to home, in the most pointed way possible. In early 2025, a rancher in Jackson County, North Park, the same valley where the first natural pack had formed, lost a cow to a wolf. But there was no collar activity anywhere in the area. CPW's own tracked wolves were confirmed to be elsewhere. Something had killed livestock, and it was a wolf, and it was not on anyone's screen. Around the same time, yet another wolf, this one a female, pushed into the state's southeast, showing up across Park, Teller, and Fremont counties, far outside the release zone. The state's explanation for all of it is, in a way, the most unsettling part. This movement, CPW says, is normal. It's expected. Wolves disperse, that's what wolves do. The collars were only ever on the animals the state itself released. Everything else, the natural migrants, the ghosts from other populations, moves through Colorado exactly as it pleases, and the agency finds out when a camera catches one, or a rancher finds a track, or a lab runs a sample. Which raises the question the whole program quietly lives with and can't fully answer. If the collars only cover the wolves you put the collars on, then how many uncollared wolves are really out there? Now, the honest part, because a story about mysterious wolves owes you the real ledger, not just the intrigue. Whatever their origin, wolves in Colorado are killing livestock, and the numbers are concrete. In the 2025 through 2026 biological year, the state documented 43 confirmed wolf depredations, 19 cattle, 23 sheep, and 1 working dog. Colorado paid out tens of thousands of dollars in direct compensation, and approved more than $700,000 in additional claims for missing livestock and production losses, animals that vanish and herds that, under the stress of wolves nearby, breed less and weigh less. For the ranching families of the Western Slope who voted against this, that ledger is the entire point. The predator they were promised would be managed is eating the animals they live on. And it cuts the other way too, hard. The wolves are dying fast. In that same year, the state recorded 10 wolf deaths against a population of only around 32 animals, an adult survival rate of just 61%. Wolves shot legally over the state line in Wyoming. A wolf hit by a car. One killed by a mountain lion. One that died in a trap. And one, Wolf 2405 of the Copper Creek Pack, deliberately killed by the state itself after it preyed on livestock in Pitkin County again and again, despite the ranchers using every non-lethal deterrent the state recommended. And the program itself is under siege from every direction at once. The plan had called for releasing 30 to 50 wolves over 3 to 5 years, but after a federal cease and desist order cut off the supply of British Columbia wolves, the state announced it would bring in no new animals during the following winter at all. A reintroduction that depends on importing wolves, suddenly unable to import wolves, trying to hold a population together on births alone against a 61% survival rate. Biologists have called it a tenuous moment. Ranchers have called it a disaster. Almost nobody has called it settled. That's the concession this story has to make, and it's a real one. For all the mystery and wonder, this is not a clean triumph. It is a hard, bloody, expensive, deeply contested experiment, with dead cattle on one side and dead wolves on the other, and a rural population that never wanted it living with it anyway. The wonder and the cost are the same story, but even that hard ledger only counts the wolves the state can see. And the deepest question in this whole saga isn't about the ones on the map, it's about the ones that aren't. So here's the thing at the center of all of it. The reason nobody knows where they came from is not a headline exaggeration, but a literal, admitted fact. Colorado's entire ability to know its wolves rests on the collar. The collar is how they count them, track them, map their packs, and assign the depredations. At the end of the most recent biological year, the official minimum count was 32 wolves, a number the state can stand behind precisely because those are the animals wearing collars or traveling with ones that do. But CPW says the quiet part out loud in its own reports. That map shows the collared wolves. The distribution of wolves without collars is not depicted. In other words, the official number is a floor, not a ceiling. It is the count of the wolves the state chose and tagged, plus whatever ghosts happen to get caught on a camera or a scat sample. And the ghosts are real. A Great Lakes wolf near Denver, 900 miles out of range, no collar, no explanation. A Moffat County wolf whose DNA matched nothing in the files. An uncollared killer in North Park that wasn't on a single screen. A female drifting through the southeastern counties. The confirmed natural dispersals stretching back through 2019, 2015, 2009, 2006, 2004, every one of them a wolf that arrived with no help, no collar, and often no traceable point of origin because, as the state itself admits, only a small fraction of the wider Rocky Mountain wolf population is marked at all. When a wolf leaves Wyoming or Montana or somewhere farther, it doesn't carry papers. It just walks. A dispersing wolf can cover ground at a pace that defies belief. Young animals have been tracked moving hundreds of miles in a matter of weeks, crossing highways, rivers, mountain ranges, and state lines without pause, driven by nothing more than the oldest instinct their species has to find unclaimed country and a mate. Colorado, sitting in the gap between recovering populations north, west, and south, is exactly the kind of unclaimed country that instinct points toward. The state didn't just invite wolves in, it sits at the crossroads every wandering wolf in the region is already pointed at. This is the reveal, and it reframes the entire program. Colorado did not so much reintroduce wolves as accelerate a return that had already started on its own, and in doing so it built a detailed, careful, satellite-tracked map of exactly one slice of the wolves in the state, the ones it released. Everything outside that slice is guesswork. The reintroduction gave Colorado a number it can defend. It did not give Colorado the truth, because the truth is that wolves are moving back into this state through a door the state doesn't control, from populations it can't fully sample, on journeys it can't always trace, and the collar, the one tool the whole program is built on, is blind to every wolf that didn't come out of a CPW crate. So when someone asks how many wolves are really in Colorado tonight, the most honest possible answer is the one that should raise the hair on your neck. At least 32. And nobody, not the biologists, not the ranchers, not the agency with its maps and its collars, can tell you the real number or where all of them came from. The collar was supposed to be the answer to that question. Instead, it became the measure of how much the state can't see. Everything the collar touches, Colorado knows cold, and everything it doesn't is a shadow moving through the sagebrush at night, real enough to kill a cow, invisible enough to leave no name. Step back, and the shape of it gives itself away. We started with a state that thought it was writing a clean story. Voters, biologists, collars, a controlled return of a species on a deadline. And the closer we looked at the edges of that clean story, the more the control dissolved. A body on a freeway in 2004. A Great Lakes ghost near Denver. DNA that answers to no file. A killer with no collar in the valley where it all began. The wolves, it turns out, were never really following our script. Colorado held a vote and flew in 25 animals and told itself it was in charge of the timeline. But the wolves had already decided, years earlier on their own, that the empty country at the heart of the Rockies wasn't going to stay empty, and no ballot measure and no satellite collar was ever going to change the fact that a wolf goes where it wants and doesn't tell anyone where it's been. We put a collar on the ones we chose. The rest are still out there in the dark, uncounted, doing the one thing a century of eradication couldn't stop them from doing: coming home. And Colorado isn't the strangest case of this. One state over, a big predator that was declared officially extinct decades ago keeps turning up on trail cameras anyway. Real animals confirmed by DNA. In mountains where the science says there shouldn't be a single one left. That mystery is already waiting for you on the channel. Subscribe, and I'll show you the ghost cat that refuses to stay gone.